Good to go. All right. So our guest speaker today is Lisa Johnson, and she is here from Abbie Shelter, and she's going to give us a presentation of what they do and why we need them.
Yes, yes. Yeah, thanks for having me. So I'm just going to talk to you guys a little bit today about our organization and our services, and then if people have questions just about domestic violence in general, I'm happy to answer those questions as well. So like Karen said, I'm from the Abbie Shelter. We are an organization here in the Flathead Valley that helps survivors of domestic violence and sexual assault. So domestic violence is now referred to as intimate partner violence. And so you guys might hear me use the term IPV. That's just what that means, is intimate partner violence. And so we are actually the only organization and shelter for several hundred miles. So we do have a shelter, and I'll talk a little bit more about our shelter when I talk about our services. But we get a lot of people who, because we're close to the train station and stuff, we get a lot of people seeking shelter here because there's just not another one for quite a ways. So there's a shelter in Missoula, there's a shelter in Ronan, Bozeman, Helena, Great Falls, but it's not like there's one in Whitefish or Columbia Falls, right? So we serve all of Flathead County. We are limited to our service area. So we can't, if we get a lot of people who contact us from other areas, and unfortunately we can't offer them services unless they're here. But
why is that?
Just because we can't go and meet somebody. We can't, the services that we have to offer are pretty local to here. So if somebody wanted to file an order of protection, we wouldn't be able to help them do that in Hamilton or wherever. Okay, so let me just give you guys some history on our organization and kind of how we came to be and how our services have built over time. So the Abbie Shelter is actually almost 50 years old. We were established in 1976. So next year we're celebrating 50 years of Helpline. And so when this organization was formed, it was like this group of grassroots ladies that just they saw a need in the community and they really wanted to help. And so they formed what was at that time called the Kalispell Rape and Violence Free Crisis Line. And that group of women quite literally just answered the phone in their houses and helped victims of violent crimes that might need someone to talk to, or just a shoulder to lean on, or maybe they had to go to the hospital and they needed some support there. So that's what those ladies did. And it's kind of grown from there. If you go onto our website, there's a picture of all those first ladies that answered the phones. And they're pretty amazing women. We wouldn't be where we are without all of them. So we're very grateful to them. So then in the 80s is when we saw people start to recognize domestic violence as a problem, an epidemic that wasn't just something that happened behind closed doors, that people really needed to step up and help these women who were experiencing horrible violence in their homes. And that's when we started to see shelters pop up all over the United States. So in the 80s and 90s, you started to hear more about women's shelters, or YWCA being formed. And in, I think it was Christmas Eve of 1994, our shelter opened, the Abbie Shelter opened. At that time, our organization was actually called the Violence Free Crisis Line, and the shelter, just our shelter, was the Abbie Shelter. Since then, we've combined those two, and now the Abbie Shelter is the whole umbrella under which we operate. But Abbie, so the Abbie Shelter is actually named after a woman named Abbie Fredericks. She was one of those grassroots ladies, and she cared so much about her community, and she just wanted to make a huge difference. And she was this beacon of light in this community. And so, like I said, if you go to our website, her picture's all over the place too. But that's who the Abbie Shelter is named after. And so when we started, again, it was just a small little shelter. We're still in the same location. It's not big and it's a little bit run down. But we have it, and it's a safe place for people to go if they're trying to flee a violent or abusive relationship. And I want to put out there that our shelter is not exclusive to women. We are all inclusive, and so we will serve any gender or any how people identify, regardless of their gender identity, their sexual preference, whatever. Like, we are inclusive to all people, because we recognize that domestic violence is not specific to one gender. Women can be perpetrators just as much as men, and men can be victims just as much as women. We sometimes use the terms, like when I talk about survivors, I'll say she. Talk about abusers, I say he, because statistically, that's the way it works. But we don't hate men. We know, we recognize that it happens to them too. In fact, I got a call from a male on the helpline yesterday that had been assaulted. So it happens. So now we have a lot more services available. And so I'll talk a little bit about those services and kind of what is included under each of those things. So we have, first and foremost, we have our helpline. Our helpline is and I have services booklets here for people that might want that as well. Our helpline is the gateway to all of our services. So if somebody wants to access Abbie Shelter services, they have to go through the helpline first. And there are a number of ways that people can do that. Our phone number, our helpline phone number, is all over everything. It's in that booklet. It's on our website. It's everywhere. And so they can either call our helpline. Our helpline is currently Monday through Friday, 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. We used to be 24-hour, and we just could not staff the shifts as we needed to. So we made a decision last year to move to just a 12/5 helpline rather than 24 hours. We are the only helpline in the state of Montana that's volunteer run. And unfortunately, volunteerism has been on a steady decline since COVID. And so we don't have enough volunteers to run the helpline. So our staff has to step in at times. And that's a huge need for us right now is volunteers. Because we're a very small group. Our team is only 7. We don't have the energy and the space to do everything. So we rely on volunteers a lot. So like I said, our helpline is volunteer run. So it goes from 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. and that happens in 2 shifts. So we usually have one person who answers calls on the helpline from 9 to 5, and then somebody else does it from 5 to 9. Some volunteers choose to do the whole 12-hour shift. It just kind of depends on what people's availability is. I would say, I get this question a lot. I would say that our highest call volume day is either Mondays or Tuesdays. Usually, I'm not sure what the deal is with Tuesdays. That's a weird day, but it seems like we get a lot of calls on Tuesdays. Mondays make sense. It's after the weekend and people are scared and they want to get out. We used to get a lot of calls on Fridays. We don't anymore. It's typically, so it's kind of the opposite of when you think of like, like if people called CPS or something, it's, Christmas is often a big day because people are all together. It works the opposite way for domestic violence. So like we don't get any calls on the helpline on Christmas because everyone loves each other and everyone's happy and they're not beating each other up. But 4th of July, Super Bowl, those are high call volume days because people are drinking and they get mad and they become abusive. So like I said, we get, I would say on average, like I was on the helpline on Monday and I got 3 calls, I think, that were all kind of big situations that needed some intervention. So they're not all like that. Sometimes we just get people that are like, hey, I just need information on how to find a therapist. And sometimes we get people who are like, I'm in danger and I need help. I need a safe place to go. So what we do on the helpline, we listen to their story. We do not judge. We believe every survivor that calls us. So we listen to them. We give them a safe place to talk about what they're going through. We offer support and we give referrals. And so when people call us and they're asking for different resources, maybe they need help with housing. So depending on their situation, we might refer them to our shelter where they can come and live for several months. Or we might refer them to other like Samaritan House or Community Action Partnership so that they can work with somebody to try to access low income housing. Until we give those referrals. If they say, hey, like I've been an addict for a long time and I really want to get clean and sober, like, do you have anywhere for me to go? We give referrals to, addiction treatment facilities. If they're like, I really need a therapist, we give referrals to therapists, that sort of thing. So we have a whole list of community resources that we go over for any caller that calls us. I will say we are lacking resources in this community, and it's a huge barrier. And there's nothing we can do about it. Like, it's just the way it is. Yes, exactly. And, there's no affordable housing. There's the things that our survivors need are very limited where we live. So we really try to get creative about some of those things too. And so like I mentioned, sometimes people, like last week, we had 3 different people who contacted our helpline and were like, one of them was like, I was staying at a domestic violence shelter in Vegas and they bought me a train ticket and told me to come to Whitefish. We're like, don't come here. If you can get off somewhere else, if you can get off in Spokane, do that. There are way more resources there for you. Like we can't guarantee that our shelter would have an opening when they got here either. Because our shelter is first come, first serve, and it's never guaranteed. We only have, I'll get to that when we talk about shelter. But so that's what we do on Helpline. We listen, we support, we make referrals. Our next service is shelter. That's one of our obviously biggest services that we have available. Our shelter is a confidential location located in Kalispell. So we don't give out the address unless we absolutely have to, or somebody's coming to live there. And we ask that they don't give out the address either. Could you ask around and potentially find out the location of the shelter? Probably. But I've been a social worker in this community for 20 years. I've worked at the Abbie Shelter for 2 years, and prior to my working there, I had no idea where it was. So it's kept pretty secret.
Is it a resort home or is it a actual commercial facility?
No, it's a home.
Okay.
That was donated years ago. So it's been doctored up a little. We currently can house, I think it's 18 heartbeats is how we refer to it.
Okay.
So at our shelter location itself, we have in the shelter, there's 4 bedrooms. There's an upstairs and a downstairs. So the upstairs are 2 like very small single bedrooms. And there's like a little, kind of living room area. And then they have a shared bathroom downstairs. And then the 2 downstairs bedrooms are a little bit bigger. They each have a bathroom in their bedrooms themselves. And they have more than 1 bed. So if it's like a mom that had a kiddo, or, a couple of kids, that we could be able to have them all together in the same room. It also allows us to, like, I think our biggest room has maybe 3 beds in it. And so if it's 2 single women, we can have them room together. We also have an apartment on site that's attached to the shelter. It's not very big, but it has kind of some bunk beds and a separate bedroom. And we try to utilize that space for people that might need a little bit more privacy. So if we had a male that needed shelter, we never have, but if we did, we could utilize that apartment to kind of give him some privacy and not have everybody mixed together. We currently have a mom that has 3 kiddos living in that apartment. We've had people that had maybe 2 big dogs because we also take pets because that's a huge barrier. for survivors. They do not want to leave their animals behind. So we accept pets, and sometimes we utilize the apartment for that. We also have an off-site apartment that was donated to us for use by a church in the community. And we try to utilize that space for like transitional living. So if a woman had lived at our shelter for a while and then maybe she secured housing, but it's not going to be ready for a month, she can move out to that other apartment and kind of transition slowly to being back on her own.
So is that offsite apartment part of the 18 heartbeats?
Yes. Yeah. Our shelter is full. It's always full. We have a waiting list. Actually, I don't think we currently have a waiting list, but we did for a while. Our length of stay is 5 months. So when a person comes into shelter, and they don't necessarily have to be high danger to come into our shelter, but they have to be fleeing a domestic violent, a violent relationship. So when they come into shelter, they automatically get 5 months to stay there. In that 5 months, we have 2 shelter advocates that work with them to work on housing applications. If they don't have a job, they're working with them to find employment. If they don't have transportation, they're working with them to figure that piece out. If they need Medicaid, food stamps, like any of those things, that's what our shelter advocate, they're essentially case management. To help these women get back on their feet and be able to be independent. Our mission statement is safety, independence, empowerment. So those are our main goals. We want everybody to be safe. We want to show them how they can be independent for themselves. And then we want them to feel like, oh my God, I did this on my own, right? So that's what our shelter advocates do. So like currently we have a couple of women who are nearing the end of their 5 months and they have not secured housing yet. So we're not just going to be like, see you later, figure it out. If they are on a housing waiting list, then they're eligible for an extension. And that extension is 30 days. And currently there's no limit on how many extensions they can have, but of course if we have somebody in need, we're like, we might have to figure this out a different way. We also will hotel people. So our hotel rules are a little bit different than our shelter rules in that if we're going to hotel somebody, that person does have to be classified as high danger, and their abuser has to be local and not in jail. So looking for them. And we have a few hotels in town that have agreed to kind of give us a lesser rate, and are really great at staying confidential and placing our survivors in an area where maybe, they won't be seen on a second level or stuff like that. And we typically, the reasons for hotel vary. Sometimes somebody's like, hey, I'm going to go and stay with my mom in Idaho tomorrow, but I don't have anywhere to go tonight. So we might hotel them for the night. Or if we know that we're going to be bringing that person into shelter, but we're full, but we have somebody discharging in a week, we might hotel them for the week, that kind of thing. So, like I said, the rules are a little bit different, and sometimes the hotels have their own rules. So it gets,
they can bring in a problem.
Yeah.
Sometimes.
Yeah. And so some of those hotel rules are like, it's still confidential.
Yeah.
Consider it kind of like the shelter where don't tell anybody where you are and don't have any guests over. If you have guests over, you're breaking confidentiality. So then they would go on a do not hotel list. If they're using substances, if they're causing property damage, those are the hotel rules, not our rules. They also go on a do not hotel list. So, which if they go on the do not hotel list with the hotel, that's community wide. So then it makes it really hard for us to hotel them in the future. And so those are some of the services we do as well, of like advocacy for our people. Like maybe they're on the do not hotel list because their abuser was using substances in their last hotel room or whatever. And so we try to advocate for them with people in the community to be like, this person is a survivor. They're not, trying to piss people off or whatever. So that's pretty much shelter in a nutshell. Um, our shelter is, the building's old, so there's a lot of maintenance stuff that we have to do. That's something that's a huge need for us right now is like last week or the week before I showed up at the shelter and our office, there's an add-on to the shelter itself, which is where all our offices are. I walked up and we have this really crappy wooden fence that's, it's a big privacy fence that's been there forever. And one whole side of it had blown down. And so like, well, that's great. My husband came, he fixed it. He's like, the wood is totally rotten. So now we need a new fence. And we know that that's going to cost us thousands of dollars, which I'm not sure we budgeted for this year. So those are kinds of some of the things that we need, trying to figure out like our furnace isn't at the right level it's supposed to be, or at the right angle, things like that, that are a huge need for us right now. At the moment, we're not looking to relocate anytime soon. So this is going to be our facility for a while. We're really trying to build it up to be livable as long as we can make it livable for the time being. And the fence is a really big deal because that's how we keep people. We're in a neighborhood, so it's not just like a place kind of in the woods by itself. Like we're in the middle of a neighborhood, so we want to keep as much privacy as we possibly can.
Do the neighbors know that you're there?
Yes.
Okay.
I've been told that most of the neighborhood is aware of who we are. We obviously don't have any signs anywhere,
Right.
but like there's a huge privacy fence and cameras everywhere, so you can probably figure it out. It's kind of at the end of like a cul-de-sac, so there's not a ton of traffic coming through. And actually the house next door to us, I think is like a VRBO or something. We're like, too bad we can't use that. It's overflow. But yeah, so I mean, the neighbors have been really great. They don't cause any problems. They look out for us, kind of stuff. So that's shelter. So then we also have court services. We currently have two court advocates. One deals with issues within city limits, and one is out of city limits. So one is like Kalispell, Whitefish, Columbia Falls Police Department, and the other deals with Sheriff's Department. They are employees of the Abbie Shelter, but their offices are within their respective police departments that they work closely with. So Megan is her office is in the Sheriff's Department, and then Amy is actually like right next to Kalispell Police Department. But so what their job they do is they help people with orders of protection. So when somebody gets to the point where they're feeling so unsafe that they're worried that something's going to happen or that person is harassing them, stalking them, whatever, they sometimes want to get an order of protection, which means that person can't be around them, can't call them, can't come near them, or otherwise they're breaking the law if they do so. And so our court advocates help people obtain those orders of protection. They are not attorneys. They cannot give legal advice. We say that a lot because people keep asking.
But are they paralegal?
No.
They've just been trained up on how to do this.
Yes.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. And so they can't help people with things like dissolutions of marriage or parenting plans because those are extremely legal documents that require like a lot of other things involved. So they can't help with those things, but they can help people fill out those orders of protection. They can't tell them what to write, but they can be like, okay, this is the section where you really want to be specific about what happened or whatever. They can also go to court with survivors and be a support next to them, hold their hand, tell them what to expect, that sort of thing, which is really helpful for survivors. What we know is oftentimes, absolutely what we know is that abusers or people who choose to harm do so due to power and control, right? So like this thing right here, power and control wheel, this is what we use to determine if somebody's in an abusive relationship. And so when somebody can't hold power and control over a person anymore, then they try to jam them up in court and they'll file motions, they'll do all sorts of stuff, they'll make up lies. And so what we've seen is our survivors really need that support in court. when they have to face their abusers, because that's a really scary thing to do.
Mhm.
Another one of the biggest needs that we have for our survivors is an attorney, and we just don't have one. Nobody wants to do pro bono work all the time. And we just don't have enough. And so, and our survivors don't have the money to pay for
Right.
an attorney, you know, when you're looking at like, you know, like a $5,000 fee, that's pretty hard to come up with. So that's something that we've really been trying to work on more, is trying to partner with some attorneys. We do have a couple that we have partnered with, that one person has agreed to provide consults for some of our survivors that we pay for. She does that at a reduced fee. And so she'll just offer like a half-hour consult. So if somebody's like, I have questions about a parenting plan, they can get a consult with her. And then if she feels like they need more time, she also runs a legal clinic for us every few weeks or so. That is a little bit of a longer consult. So she won't represent people in court, but she can kind of get them to a point where they know what to expect, what to do, who to call. And then we also have, just this year, we budgeted for a legal scholarship. So we do have a law firm that agreed to offer services at a reduced rate for a certain amount of clients. And so we actually have a scholarship available for like three survivors to receive. Like, we'll pay, I think it's $5,000 to an attorney for them to be represented. So if their situation is very difficult, we know it's going to be a lot of court stuff, we might try to refer them for our legal scholarship. I wish we could do that for everyone. We just don't have the resources. So, but that's pretty much court. Our court advocates are amazing at holding those relationships that are so important. So those relationships that we have with law enforcement, the relationships that we have with judges, Amy and Megan are the ones who really hold those relationships and make them work.
The judge is pretty supportive and responsive to them.
For the most part, yes. And we're working pretty hard on connecting with those people. Our executive director is new. We lost our previous executive director last year. So our current ED, Kristen, her name's Kristen Shepherd. She's working really hard on like setting meetings with the chief of police and, different judges, and just kind of making sure we're continuing to build those relationships. Some judges are very supportive of us and our survivors and what we do, and some judges aren't always. Just kind of depends on the day and the judge. Yeah, so that's court. So then we also have mental health services. We don't currently have a mental health advocate. And so we had one. Historically, we've had an intern in that position. And what the intern has done is we have a support group that runs weekly. And our mental health intern has historically run our support group. Last year, we had an intern, and she actually then became full-time staff, and she decided to move on from the organization. And we've been in a lot of transition in the past year. Mm-hmm. So we got to the point where we're tired of hiring new people all the time. So we have not hired a new mental health person, and I'm currently covering that role. So my job I'm program director, but while covering mental health, I have been running our support group every other week. I can't do weekly, but I can do every other week. And that is a huge need for our survivors.
Have you heard of NAMI?
Mhm.
Okay.
Mhm.
Is that something that would be able to collaborate with you guys to help in that, or is that kind of different?
Maybe. So that's definitely something I could look into. I've been trying to find a facilitator for our support group. And what we had decided as a team was, we would really just kind of prefer like a therapist that we can contract with.
Mhm.
That's not necessarily a member of our staff. That's not, like right now, the ladies, I've held 4 different positions at the Abbie Shelter. And they know that I'm in leadership now. And so like when I run support group, it gets kind of dicey because they want stuff. And then they know I'm in charge, so they know to ask me.
Right.
Right? So like we want somebody that's not necessarily another staff member that makes it so that those boundaries are very clean.
Is it a volunteer position?
Yeah, it could be, or it could be paid if we're contracting for it. But I would prefer, somebody that's doesn't necessarily have to be licensed, but knows more than just, that was a struggle for interns, is like just maybe not knowing enough about counseling kind of stuff. I currently hold a social work license, but I'm not a therapist. That's not really my role. So, like I said, I'm currently covering support group. We're doing it we were doing it like monthly, and the ladies really need it more than that. So, we're trying to do every other week right now. Preferably. Yeah, preferably would be weekly. And that is held at our shelter location. Awesome. Great. Yeah, I've been kind of putting out feelers to different people as well. So then we have support group, and then the other a couple other things for mental health. We have a list on our website of trusted providers. So the people that we have listed are therapists in the community that we know have been trained in domestic violence and trauma and PTSD and are going to be understanding of a survivor situation. So when a survivor contacts us and is like, I really need a therapist, we have a whole list of people that we know are going to understand what they're going through, and provide trauma-informed care, as we like to call it. And if that survivor is like, okay, I need a therapist, but I also don't have any insurance, or I can't utilize my insurance because maybe they're on an abuser's insurance, we have a counseling scholarship. So our scholarship we have currently, I want to say 4 providers in the community that, again, have agreed to see people for a reduced fee, that we will pay for. So if somebody needs therapy and they don't have insurance, we'll pay for them to see a therapist for 10 sessions. But it's specific providers that we have like entered into a contract with, basically, not just anybody. We have also been, lately, I've been considering and allowing people to utilize the scholarship even if they have Medicaid, because like, there's no providers that accept Medicaid in this community. So even if they have insurance, they might not be able to find a provider. And we do have people utilize that counseling scholarship. We currently have, I think, 5 people utilizing that scholarship, where I've had to be like, you don't have any more availability. I might have to put people on a waiting list, which has never happened before. So I don't know if that's good or bad, but people are getting that need met for sure. And then sometimes we can provide like crisis counseling to the residents of the shelter. So, if there's an emergency situation, maybe they just had a court hearing that didn't go well and they can't get in to see their therapist or something. I can provide some crisis counseling in the moment for them to kind of get through that day. So that's mental health. And then our last program is outreach and education. So that's exactly what I'm doing right now. Talking about our services, what we do, or we have other organizations that have requested that we come and do a presentation on domestic violence 101. And what is domestic violence, and all of the things associated with that, the power control wheel, all of those things. And we've presented at a lot of different places. So at one point, the library, there was an employee of the library that was attacked by a person in the community. And so they asked me to come and give a presentation on feeling safe at work after you've been attacked and de-escalation strategies. or people have asked me to come and talk about trauma-informed care. We do a lot of presentations in schools about healthy and unhealthy relationships and consent. So I personally have given that discussion to 8th graders and 9th graders in Kalispell and Whitefish. My partner, the other community program director, Amy, she, I think, has gone into a couple of elementary schools to give some of those discussions as well. So, and she and I both are partnered with a couple of other people in the community to go and talk with like area-wide providers, school counselors about sexual abuse prevention. And we're really trying to get into the schools sooner, maybe, I don't know, 4th grade, 5th grade, to talk about boundaries, consent, what's not okay, being safe with your bodies, kind of a thing. And we've also gone into talk to the RAs at the college about sexual assault, because sexual assault's a big issue on college campuses. So yeah, we talk about all kinds of things in some of those presentations. There's a form on our website where people can go and request a presentation, and we're happy to do that for anybody. We also go and set up tables at various events. So like this weekend is the Kalispell Women's Fair, where we're going to have a table set up. I think there's another event happening that we have a table set up. We are involved in the Great Fish Community Challenge in Whitefish. And so we do a lot of those events, that kind of stuff. We don't currently have a person in the outreach position either. That used to be my role before I became program director. So all of us are kind of joining together to do the outreach stuff. But yeah, we go anywhere that people request us to go. And because we want, we just found out yesterday, for example, that Samaritan House, who is probably our closest relationship, didn't know that we serve men. They thought we only served women. So we're like, okay, we really need to get more information out there about what we do and what we offer. So that people know, because not enough people know. I didn't know, I myself am a survivor of domestic violence. I've been out of my abusive relationship for 15 years. And I've lived in this community that entire time, and I had no idea that the Abbie Shelter had so many things to offer. Because another thing that we also do alongside of all of the things I just talked about was the person who runs our helpline also serves community survivors. So if there's people who need services but necessarily don't need housing and don't need to come live in our shelter, but need other things, she holds that caseload. So we can offer people safety resources like Ring door cameras, pepper spray, dash cams for their cars, things like that. We can also offer gas cards, grocery cards, cell phones for people that need those kinds of things. We can do food donations. I mean, the list goes on and on of the things that we can offer to people. Each survivor that comes into our organization we have what we call financial assistance. And so they have a limit for the year of what they can acquire from us. The limit's $250. We would like it to be higher. That's what we can do right now. So
$250 for the year?
For the calendar year, which is really hard when gas prices are the way they are.
Yeah.
Which is really hard when you have a mom that has 4 kids and they're all under the age of 5.
And is that strictly private funds that you've raised, or grants and stuff, or does it come any of it from the government?
Can you talk to us about your
Sure.
funding and
Yeah.
your
Yeah, so we are we're a nonprofit organization, and
501c3?
yes, and our much of our funding comes from grants. So we get the FVEC, which is the Family Violence Prevention Act. We get that grant. We also get a VOCA grant, which is the Victims of Crime Act. and then we get
Are
a,
those federal or state?
they're federal.
Okay.
And then we get the VAWA grant, which is the Violence Against Women Act. So all three of those grants come to us. Actually, this week is grant reporting season. The quarter just ended. So we have to report all of those numbers for all of those things. But and all of those grants pay for wages. So we use those grants to pay employees for what they do. And then we also donations. And then we try to find whatever other grants we can. Right, so that's how we get our money, is strictly like grants and donations. A lot of our donations come in during the Great Fish Community Challenge. Last year was our highest, like we set a record for the amount of money that we raised. It was the highest that we ever have, and I think we raised over 200,000 in Great Fish Community Challenge last year. I believe that part of that was because we actually we have only had an outreach position since last June. So I was the first person in that position, in that new role. And there's a lot of social media stuff that goes along with that. So that's kind of how we try to access some of that. Oftentimes people just want to send us money, which is really nice, especially around Christmas time. But yeah, it's just, we do our fair share of hey, we really need some money right now. We're doing pretty well.
Is there anything else that can be donated, like food?
Yeah, so this is our wish list.
Okay.
It's also on our website. The things that we do not accept at the shelter are clothing. We don't take clothing donations. We don't have the space to be able to store it. But if people have clothing to donate, we ask that they take it to Flathead Industries, because Flathead Industries actually gives us vouchers to give to our ladies, so they can still go and purchase clothing from there if they needed it. Yeah, that's my best friend. Yeah. Maybe that's why we look familiar to each other.
Yes.
Surprisingly, one of our biggest needs is laundry detergent, toilet paper, those kinds of needs for the shelter.
Not suitcases. I hear that with children's shelters and I wasn't sure that is.
Yeah, we always will take that kind of stuff too.
Garbage.
Yeah, we go through a lot of garbage. And also garbage bags. The thing about the suitcases, I used to work in children's shelters and stuff too. Is don't make kids put their stuff in garbage bags and they feel like garbage. So same thing with survivors, right? So we do the best we can to make them feel empowered. We have a hole in our basement. We call it the empowerment, and I can't remember what they call it, but anyway, it's we get donations from Target and stuff, oftentimes face wash, shampoo, conditioner. And so we have this empowerment emporium, this whole thing set up where the ladies can go down and collect whatever they need, tampons, diapers, wipes, that kind of thing. We have, yeah.
One time I came there and they had diapers up to the ceiling.
We also have what we call Adopt a Family in December, and it's lots of organizations kind of have a very similar thing, where our survivors are okay, here's all the stuff that we need or want for Christmas, and then we have donors that buy all of those things. And then so last year we did it a little bit differently, and our program director at the time did the specific things that people asked for. And then also we need gas cards, we need grocery cards, we need, diapers. We got so many diapers. We had to actually get rid of some, boxes and boxes and boxes of diapers. Excuse me. This is another thing that obviously takes money, but is a huge resource for our survivors. And we just give this out to whoever. because I don't want to say like it's our Bible, because it's not, but it really helps people to understand exactly this. Like, why does he do that? So that's another resource that,
And I noticed it's written by a man,
yeah,
which has a lot more validity to it for the abused women.
yes, yep,
So,
yep. There's another book that we just started giving out called The Body Keeps the Score, and it's all about like trauma in your body.
Yeah.
Also extremely triggering, but really good information. Yeah, like we just have tons of resources and we want people to know about them. And also like we have still a lot of needs that, you know, like I said, we get lots of donations, but we have a fence that's fallen down, so.
Have you seen a difference over the years on the cause of the domestic violence? Like,
Mhm.
because historically, of course, alcohol has been here in the valley, but
Mhm.
now with all the weird stuff coming in.
Yeah, so that's what's interesting is that when we're looking at causes for domestic violence, we have, like, if you were to think of it kind of like a tree, right? So there's root causes and then there's like leaf symptoms of domestic violence. And so those root causes are power control and entitlement. Really is what it comes down to, like one person feeling entitled over another person's body. When we're looking at things like substance use, that's one of those leaf symptoms, because a person can go and get drunk and maybe they beat the crap out of their wife, but they can also go and get drunk and they don't beat the crap out of the guy at the grocery store. Like they can control it in public, right? So that's where it comes down to that power and control piece. Certainly substances don't help. And so that has been, well, the other thing that substances can do is it can also keep, like it's a way for an abuser to continue abusing a survivor. So maybe he gets her addicted to drugs and then he withholds the drug. That happens a lot with trafficking. And so that's where we're seeing problems with like a lot of fentanyl coming in, right? Where people are getting addicted to those things, because what we know about domestic violence and substance use is they go hand in hand. Like 80% of women who struggle with substances have been in a domestic violence relationship. Either they're using either as a way to numb it and get away from it, or they're being forced to, or you know, that's really the only two reasons. But I mean, it's just like it's a coping skill, right? So we are seeing a lot more, we're getting a lot more survivors that have substance addiction. Yeah, more than we used to, I think. And like really, you know, it's not just like alcohol, it's scary drugs.
And it's that understanding, this is really cool sound, stay in this room, but I was appointed an advocate 20 years ago. That stood between me and restraining, and that was really nice to have somebody in between me and that person. And it is not a weak person.
Right.
So I consider myself a very strong woman, and still, I found myself in that situation.
Domestic violence does not discriminate.
I almost feel like it's strong women that it's easier, where just because it's like I can handle it, that mindset of like, and then the lack of wanting to ask for help too is a thing, you know, like that.
Well, and abusers are very good because it's their survival.
They're super savvy.
They are so good at finding the trigger points that make you keep coming back.
they develop over years.
Yeah, and they're super insecure inside, but they have to survive, and that is their survival skills. They're extremely good at it. Yeah.
And some women, more often than not, will say things like, "Oh well, people have it way worse than me. Like he's not hitting me." And sometimes
Yes.
emotional,
I would say.
exactly,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
If we're looking at the continuum of domestic violence, we know it's gonna happen eventually. And sometimes emotional abuse is worse. I mean, that was the majority of my abusive relationship, and I'm still, like, it's been 15 years, I have a new partner, he's amazing, not abusive, and I still have, like, moments where I question things, or myself, or, you know, like, that trauma is gonna be with me forever. So yeah, it can happen to anybody, and the shame, and especially if you're a person like in the social work field, like the shame and guilt associated with that, you just don't want anybody to know.
And I think another thing is, you know, God, he's such, around you, you hear, he's the nicest guy in all of this, and you're like, yeah, but this is what it is behind the doors, so it makes you embarrassed, you know, yeah.
They seek one person out.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
you know, people go, oh, well, he's always just been so nice to me. Well,
Right.
I'm not his partner. Like, he
Right.
seeks out a person, you know, and that's where he goes with it.
As the country western song says, no, by Charlie Rich, nobody knows what goes on behind closed doors.
That's exactly true.
And the abused believe they're the exception. And to get them to understand that there's a lot of people.
Some of the women who are in the most danger, and we have a tool that we use on the helpline to determine a person's level of danger. But some of the women that are like in the highest level of danger are the ones that are like, oh yeah, that happened. Like, minimize, you know, oh, it wasn't that big of a deal, when you're like, it's the worst story I've ever heard. Because that trauma is just like, that's part of that dissociation, is absolutely like trauma. Just like, this is how I have survived this long.
Yeah, I have a dear friend who went through years of just the emotional, right? Until the one day that he shoved her up against the counter and she divorced him. When she divorced, they had been married for 50 years.
Yeah. Yeah, we get a lot of people who
Yeah.
are like, oh, I've been with him since I was 16, and then you hear their story and it's just like years of brainwash.
Right.
And I've started realizing that it's domestic violence is all around us. Like, start paying attention in the grocery store, when you're watching a movie, when you're driving down the street. Like, there's little bits and pieces that you'll pick up and be like, why is this so normalized all of a sudden? Like,
And it's in all socioeconomic levels.
It's wild, actually. These little bits and pieces I pick up, you know, I might see a guy with his arm around his wife in the grocery store, and I'm like, that's nice. And then I look a little closer and he's pinching her, or he's, you know, like, there's little things.
Yeah.
And your connection with the law enforcement and the judges are great, because the first time the judge did not sign.
Right. How supportive are our judges here?
Well, that
Because
guy,
I
that
have
judge
been-
is not here anymore.
No, but I have been in family court, when supported, you know, stance and family court. And it was disgusting what the judge did. I've seen that twice, 2 different judges. So it's very important to me to have all of our legal entities to be so supportive of this, because it is so prevalent and it's not doing anything but growing. Lisa and I talk about, like, oh, wouldn't it be nice if we didn't need you?
Yeah, yeah.
But you are so vital and important.
Yeah.
We absolutely have to have you.
I do get the judges too, because often in court, especially in divorce courts and all this stuff, the guy is by default the bad guy, which is totally not always the case. So for a judge to figure out, you know,
Well, and sometimes.
what is actually going on.
Right.
Yeah.
And sometimes, like, here's an example. I had a survivor who we've worked with for a long time. She's been a long-time client. She's just been in high danger throughout with more than one abuser. So she's trying to get an order of protection. We were in court, and when she sees him, and he's kind of he's I wouldn't say he's well spoken, but he's better spoken than she is. And she just has so much anxiety. And so when she sees him, she gets all flustered and she can't choose her words very well. And so that's what was happening in this hearing, in this courtroom. And, and he's going, see, I told you she's just crazy, which we know is something abusers say. And I can't tell her. I was there with her in court. Like, I can't say, this is what you need to say. I'm not an attorney. So she's not saying the right things. And so then the judge has no reason, he can't help it but go, you haven't proved your point. Like,
Yeah.
There's no evidence
He
here.
can surmise it, but he can't rule.
Right.
On that. He can
Exactly.
only rule on what's in front of him.
Right. So yes, it's frustrating, and we want to be like, damn it, judge. But like, his hands are also tied. Like they're, I desperately wanted to be like, no, you need to say this and this and this, but I can't. So that's where, it can be extremely frustrating, but it's not one person's fault or decision or whatever. I would say that the judges have been supportive. There are, in the past couple of weeks, there's been a couple of times where a couple of judges have kind of like seen through some things and been and like read the Abusers the Riot Act in court. And like, you're an idiot, knock it off. And when Amy or Megan are in the courtroom, the judges know them well. And so they know that like, this is probably going to be a different situation and maybe should be handled a little more gentler or whatever, because they have good relationships with those ladies. But
There's high value to that.
yeah. And sometimes there's just nothing they can do. And court is the way it goes, and the justice system is the way it is. And sometimes, we have to be like, yeah, you're gonna have to co-parent with your abuser, and that really sucks. I'm sorry, but that's the way it is. Yeah.
Well, I appreciate the fact that you don't say, okay, we're done, this is all we can do, that you continue long-term relationship, so that one day they're not the survivor or the victim.
Yeah.
That they can graduate out of that because you're just walking through the process. And then the other question I have is that if somebody was interested in the mental health and counseling and stuff, would they contact you?
Yes.
Yeah.
So I left some of our general business cards,
Okay.
and then some of mine specifically that have my email and my phone number on them. And they can just contact me. The other thing is that if you guys, any of you know anybody, currently our volunteer application is closed. We're going to reopen it like today or tomorrow. And we're going to need volunteers. So there's a volunteer application on our website.
So they have background checks.
Yeah, so they can fill out the application, then we kind of do a screening, do a background check, and then continue on training. The training, if somebody if you're like, hey, Abbie Shelter needs volunteers and they want to know more, training for specifically for helpline is it's only like 10 hours. It's all virtual. It's all done it's video that we have created. So we are actually like the ones training the volunteers.
Okay.
Yeah. Any other questions?
What is the Great
Fish Community Challenge? It starts in August and it runs for 5 weeks. It's put on by the Whitefish Community Foundation.
It's a big deal.
It's a big deal.
Well, it's like 90 nonprofits in the organization or in the community that benefit from it.
And the reason that they started it years ago is because businesses were getting tired of being by nonprofits. So it's like what, 3 months? 4 months? What is because it starts and then finishes.
It starts in August and it's 5 weeks.
5 weeks. Yeah, so in 5 weeks, nonprofits rally really hard, and then Community Foundation has investors. And so depending on what was raised and how much the Community Foundation had in their fund, they match whatever is being raised up to a certain percent, sometimes it's 30%.
Last year, the match was amazing.
Yeah.
Like it was huge.
I just keep hoping that I mean, they're a fairly young organization.
Yeah.
You know, the old saying, be careful what you wish for, because I just hope that they do not morph into a United Way.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I don't think so. I think it's,
I'm hoping
know,
not.
It's
You
a
know.
difference.
yeah, and last year's,
Well, but so was United Way early on.
last
And
year's
now
was
it's so
pretty
bureaucratic.
awesome. And they have some new people at Whitefish Community Foundation that are crushing it.
Yeah,
They're doing a really
yeah,
good
they,
job.
they are really good.
Mhm.
They're
I have a quick question.
Sure.
So like, as you were saying, noticing out in public and stuff, so like, what would you advise, like, somebody that's, a stranger
Mhm.
witnessing obvious domestic abuse out in the public? I mean, you kind of have that back and forth of like, you want to help and protect and, help an innocent person, but then you also don't want to make it worse for that person or
Right.
Or put
potentially
yourself in danger.
yeah,
Yeah.
potentially putting yourself in danger, like how, but then you also feel really crappy about just looking the other way.
Right. That's tricky and it's a fine line. And we've actually talked a lot about this as a team because, a lot of our people on our staff like to go to music festivals or concerts or whatever. And you always see, and so we're like, where should we step in? Like we're advocates, we're experts. And so I'd say, yes, it could make it could make it worse, right? Like if somebody says something and she goes home and she's going to get punished because this person said this in the community. I try to tell people just to advocate as best as you can. Like, what you can handle in a certain situation and what your limit for safety is. And if you see something, say something. Like we've had people, I have received a call on the helpline from a woman who witnessed an event at Walmart. And she was like, I saw this happen. I grabbed her away. She's currently sitting in my car while I'm talking to you and the cops just showed up. And so like it's happened before. Now, when that happens and people call our helpline on behalf of someone else, happens a lot. We can give all the resources we want, but we also have to speak to that person directly, and that's on them. So like in that situation, that young woman never called us. And so I don't know if she
You can only
got
do
safe
so
or not.
much.
Yeah. But I try to be very like, I tend to see bad stuff happening everywhere. And my husband tells me all the time, like, not everyone is being sex trafficked. Are you sure? And so, that's a line I have to set for myself of like, am I really seeing this or am I just thinking that I see it because I see it everywhere?
Well, we thank you so much for the
Yeah.
presentation. There's a whole lot that we learned.
Yeah.
We had no idea there was so much. Yeah, and I appreciate the wish list.
Yeah, I'm happy to leave like all of these materials. If you guys want these books or if you want me to take them back with me or whatever. We're trying to get these booklets out to as many places as possible.
Oh, that's a good idea. Yeah.
The other thing I didn't mention is that we're also really closely partnered with the hospital who does SANE exams. So like that pamphlet there that talks about sexual assault. The SANE exam is a sexual assault nurse's exam. The head SANE nurse, her name's Annalise Wilson. And she's up at the hospital and we partner pretty closely with her. So anytime like somebody comes in and she does a SANE exam, she sends us a referral form so that we can then get in touch with that person and offer some services. Because it might not be, while sexual assault happens within relationships, like it also happens from strangers. So
But more often than not, it's well known that it's with the
Yes.
relationship.
yes, the majority of the time, the person knows their attacker.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank you, Lisa.
Yeah.
A heavy subject that was presented so delightfully.
Thank you. I try to,
Yeah.
put a good spin. It's not the most fun topic. It's really not fun when I have to talk to eighth graders at 8 o'clock in the morning.
Oh, there we go.
On Monday.
There we go.
And they're like, really, but yeah. Okay, well, like I said, I'll just kind of leave this stuff here for you guys.
I don't know if the books, because those are for.
We have like 100 of them.
Okay,
I would highly suggest that every woman.
yeah.
read it.
I like.
Every time we have a table set up somewhere, like the women's fair or whatever, I always put one on the, I have a pile of them in my little bin, and I set one on the table, and I give at least one away every
Exactly.
single time.
Yeah.
Yeah, so,
All right.
We visit with you.
Oh, I think we should take a picture. Wait.
Yeah, I took like a
Oh, did you?
nonchalant one, but if
Our
you wanna like
secretary
a
isn't
posed
here today.
one.
She gave us directions.
We
We do everything.
Yeah, I mean, I can see you like talking, so I don't know if you want that,
That's
or
what she
if
was
you'd
doing,
rather
right?
like.
yeah, I mean,
A
was
posed
talk about
The talking one, okay, yeah.
That's great.
I was
And
the
if
freak
you,
out.
you know, you can, if you guys put it on like social media or something, we share those pictures too, to let people know, like, we do these things.
Mhm.
So, yeah. If
Yeah,
you
so
tag
you're
us
on social media?
I totally
Yep.
will.
Facebook and Instagram?
Mhm.
Perfect.
Cool.
Just the Abbie Shelter.
All right.
Okay.
Thank you so
Yeah,
much.
thank you. Nice to meet you all.
Thank you.
Okay.
So I'll just talk to you real quick here anyway.
Yeah.
Are you familiar with
Oh, goodness, like this. Yeah. Okay, so Jane,
Yes.
hello. Yeah.